What's the most nobody knows job that pays really good amounts of money? Nuclear divers. They make repairs in nuclear reactors. It's actually not very dangerous if you don't do it a lot. Water is a very good shield against radiation, and the divers receive a relatively small dose if you compare it to the background radiation we all get during a year of just living our lives. You only have to work once every few months because of the amount of radiation you receive, and you can make up to $100,000 per year. Tube operators. Tube is in the British subway. Because the job is so depressing, whoever takes on the job actually gets paid quite a decent amount. However, the conditions are actually awful. Underground means not much lighting. The air is stuffy and there is no one to talk to. You can make a good amount of money and you don't have to talk to people? I'm currently applying for British citizenship. Unfortunately, you'll have to start as a station attendant or something similar. Driver is the top of the transport for London career ladders. You get paid pretty well, like £60,000 per year, but that's as high as you can go. Plus, there's always the chance some poor human being will jump in front of your train. As far as part-time work, I work valet and make around $30 per hour on average. It's a ton when it's literally the easiest job in the world. Shut off your brain and run for cars. The timpanist, or kettle drummer of the orchestra, gets paid really well. Only the first violin gets paid more. It turns out that keeping those kettle drums tuned requires an enormous amount of skill. Maybe this is common knowledge, but I just learnt that UPS drivers get compensated pretty well. I've got a friend who's a UPS driver. Can confirm the pay is decent, but he works his butt off. Loads of vacation as well. The catch? It's somewhat like the career of a professional athlete. Big money while you're doing it, but it won't last forever. Old UPS drivers are extremely rare. An important thing to keep in mind with all these jobs is that you should also say where you are. Cost of living is a thing. The worrisome part is that people forget about this in real life too. I have a relative who used to hire people for a government bureau in DC. He said there was no shortage of people who thought they were going to be making bank for an entry-level position based on the salary, and not considering that $75K in DC is not the same as $75K in their small hometown or college town. This is very true. Where I live, that's a lot, but inner city New York? No way, Jose, you'd be living hand to mouth on that. College girlfriend's parents both played in a major city orchestra and got paid more than $100K. Both had PhDs in music. My dad is a physician and my mum is a nurse anesthetist, a job which pays just as much as lots of doctors make, and many don't know it. Just take a master's. Specialist welders. My brother in the southeast makes $250,000 plus to do welding on nuclear projects. He has to have security clearance and a bunch of unique training. He works ridiculous hours in spurts, but has a lot of downtime when a project is either being treated or he's waiting on some special metal to arrive. I've heard of underwater welders making similar money, but they have to live on a rig and most of it is really just hazard pay. Underwater welding is super dangerous and bad for your body. You get paid well because you usually die before you reach 60 because of being exposed to hazardous chemicals. Celebrity dog walker. Technically not no one knows and more of a no one notices job. I'm from Singapore and my uncle sells Hainanese chicken rice as a hawker at $2.50 a plate. Even though the working conditions look rough, he rakes in more than $150K a year. Wow. Might consider taking over his business if I flunk university. Some people are questioning these figures. Well, I'd say that his stall is rather popular and manages to sell about a couple of hundred plates during the lunch and dinner crowd. He works through weekends too, where he gets most of the business. I'm amazed at how much you guys are interested in knowing more about Singapore and where the stall is. Well, Singapore does have a high cost of living, if you're talking about housing and cars, but $150K is definitely enough for you to lead a comfortable life. Although, as some of you have correctly pointed out, his working hours are madness. He wakes up at 4 a.m. every single day to prepare the chicken, the rice, and to set up his stall, and goes home at around 11 p.m. He can't hire workers as well, because he has to protect his recipe. Tech for events. The grunts do okay, but the guys with any skill do well. Corporate events pay better, but concerts don't build themselves. Like anywhere, you'll run into cheap employers. This is a red flag. You might not get paid at all. Avoid these buttholes. There are plenty of gigs that pay well on time. Ask your entertainment union what skills they pay the most for and what they need most. It won't be steady for a while, but get your name out there. If you want a company gig, ask which companies they'd work for if they wanted that sort of gig. You'll learn a lot from what they say, regardless of what you choose to do. Right now, I'm making $60 an hour to scratch my butt. Nothing next week, but that's okay with me. Every job done on a cruiser or a trading vessel will be paid far more than the same job on land. Plus, you don't have to spend any money. I've never met a cruise ship employee that looked happy. They all had the fake Disney smiles going on. Except the entertainment. Those guys spend like 90% of the time hitting on women at the bar. Do cruise ships need IT? I should be more specific. I'm not looking to go back into desktop support. I was thinking more systems administration, which is what I do now. Surprisingly, yeah. Modern cruise ships have a pretty extensive IT infrastructure, and it has all the same problems as on land with the unique problems of being on sea for days at a time. Be aware that it's a pretty grim job at times, since you're sometimes tracing down cabling through conduits that you can often find dead rats in, or some horrible slime that seems to accumulate in places on cruise ships, where they never seem to actually get washed or painted. I've never done the at-sea job, but I did a lot of consulting work on infrastructure upgrades on some cruise ships many years ago. I talked to the onboard IT guys and they told me some horror stories. And to be honest, the IT stuff seems to be the exception to the rules set beforehand. The pay isn't actually any better than on land and is often worse. The free food and cheap drinks are still okay, but bear in mind that you're on call all the time while the ship's at sea. And when in port, you'll rarely, if ever, get on land. You'll also become the de facto desktop support for the rest of the crew and often the passengers. It's also worth noting that they're mostly looking for more entry-level people for the onboard crew. They rely mostly on consultants to build properly redundant systems that'll survive at sea. And when it breaks, they'll switch to the redundant backup and leave the failed hardware and systems until they get back to shore and can get a consultant to come back on board to fix it. And bear in mind that my experience was some years ago. I know even then they were looking to outsource as much of their IT as possible. And so these days, it's likely IT on a cruise ship is heavily outsourced. I've heard you can make some pretty crazy money working on oil rigs. The hours are insane, you have to leave home for a while and the job sucks, but apparently you can make a killing doing it. Yeah, but dying can also be a problem there. I mean, done deal, sign me up. Oh, you poor phlegmatic and passionless people crack me up. However, I can't imagine any fate on one of those things would be entirely pain-free. Industrial accident or dying in a fire is a lose in my books. Being a court reporter pays extremely well. I live in Texas. The salaries for court reporters here average $75K and up, including retirement and paid vacation time. Even as a freelance deposition reporter, you can make upwards of $100K if you put in the time. It's definitely a skill though. You need to have a strong command of the English language. The theory behind writing on steno machines is also incredibly unique. You will need to be able to alter your normal ways of spelling to be able to write correctly. In Texas, there is a state certification that must be passed before you can be licensed. Texas requires you to write at a speed of 225 strokes per minute for at least 5 minutes. The test is definitely a huge barrier for a lot of people to get licensed. People who clean up crime and accident scenes. Someone shot themselves in the head in your house? Old lady died and wasn't found for a few weeks? The medical examiner and emergency teams will come and take the body, but all of that blood, leaked fluid, bits of crap, and complete nastiness, yep, that's on you to deal with. Enter people who clean up scenes like this for a living, and they can charge whatever they want, because can you really put a price on not having to deal with that mess yourself? Elevator tradesman. An older brother of a friend of mine had this job and did indeed make a very good living. The only real catch was that he was almost always on call. We'd be hanging out at like 11 p.m., pounding beer and playing video games, and then the older brother would go take a leak and come back in his work jumpsuit like, gotta go fix an elevator and be right back. Thanks for adding the drunk elevator technicians to my list of things I worry about killing me now. Not only does it pay well, but we really need some new blood in the masonry industry. People, if you don't like school, don't go to college, learn a trade. My dad used to shoot wildlife that would stray onto airport runways, and he was on about $65K a year if I recall correctly. A buddy of mine did that. They replaced him with a falcon. Sales professional at a luxury retail store. I worked at a jewelry store in Las Vegas making over $100K a year and being under 30 years old. If you're with the right company and in the right city, commission is limitless. Being in the right location for the right brand is also important here. Though both would technically be luxury jewelry salespeople, there's a difference between working at a major brand in or near a major city versus working at a K Jewelers in a strip mall near a sleepy suburban town. The sexton of a church who gets paid a substantial salary, with benefits and pension, to ring the steeple bells on the hour. Between bell-ringing sessions, he polishes the brass in the church and gets it ready for funerals, weddings, and weekend services. But most of the time, he acts as a tour guide for those visiting the building on weekdays who want to see the church's original Tiffany stained glass windows. Some people put down trade jobs such as plumbing, welder, etc. because they don't require a college degree. After completing trade school, and if you're accepted into a union, you can make more than a decent amount of money and have great benefits to go with it. There are more alternatives than college where you can make a living for yourself, and getting a trade is a great alternative. On top of getting a good job, you also avoid the student debt. Be aware that some occupations are tough on the body. You may not like it so much after kneeling on roofs for 20 years. You can submit your own stories to be featured here on the channel. The story submission link is in the description below. And if you want to listen to some vibey music in the background, check out Easy Mode, also linked below, and subscribe. Health economist. The field of health economics didn't really take off until the late 90s, and it's booming as of today. OECD countries are starting to realize they need more efficient ways to manage and organize their healthcare systems. Countries like Italy are still at ground zero when it comes to economic evaluation of medication or technologies, diagnostic tests, treatments, among other things. The prime example is the UK, which has a completely separate body called NICE to carry out evaluations for the NHS. People with a master's or PhD in health economics are in massive shortage and wanted by pretty much every international organization or technological consultancy or government body, and of course, by pharmaceutical companies as well, and they're paid very, very well. My source? I'm a health economist working for a major international organization. Driving a commuter train in Toronto, Canada, pays $80,000 a year. I mean, you can be high on white snow, you just have to watch your speed. Seems about as good a time as any to remind everyone that any advice given out in these videos is generally free speech compliant stories submitted via the internet. Personally, the narrator does not recommend working any sort of machinery, let alone commuter vehicles, while doing that or any other substance. My father is a welder and has done work as a plumbing assistant. He's always worked factory or machine operator type jobs, but he always had a steady side gig by doing welding and fabricating on the side out of his backyard shop. When he'd get laid off, as is common in factory work, he'd just ramp up the welding to full-time. When I needed veneers for my teeth as a preteen due to staining from medication I had to take as a child, the insurance deemed it as cosmetic and wouldn't pay. It was $900 a tooth and I needed 4 of them. He made the money in 2 months out of the backyard shop. I don't have a college degree, but I make around $70K in Wisconsin. Industrial inspection, NDE or NDT, mostly checking high-pressure welds with X-ray, magnetics, etc. Downside is the hours. I'll end up working around 80 this week, and you don't always know your schedule, but it's alright for a mid-20s guy without kids or too many responsibilities. Took me about 2.5 years to get to this level. Started around $13 an hour and now around 25. Company paid for me to go to class and get my certifications, which is how you get the raises. I was a merchandise roadie. Upfront pay was between $100 to $200 a day. My per diem was $6 to $20 a day. International travel was free. Our accommodation in hotels and tour bus bunks were free as well, and you could rent a place anywhere you like because it's not like you're commuting. Travel from your location to the starting point of the tour is usually free, though living within an hour of the capital city helped me get work, as a lot of tours started there. Food was free. Alcohol was also free. You had to pay for your own substances, though, unless you were a hot girl. Riding around with bands on tour buses, accruing stories and seeing the world, hard labor every day. Your job is sometimes excruciatingly hectic. I was once in Cologne and sold 13,000 euros worth of 3 Doors Down t-shirts in one night on my own. But in a sense, free. I toured with Adele 3 times, LaRue 3 times, Lenny Kravitz, Interpol, Red Hot Chili Peppers, and tons more. Smaller acts were way more fun, especially metal bands, but nobody gets excited when you say you toured with Annihilator for 2 months. God, that was the best part. Between the ages of 19 and 27, I toured constantly until I gave it up to make an animated series. Now I'm 30 and we're about to start pitching a new pilot. Pipe fitters. Sort of a different version of an HVAC R-Tech, primarily focusing on industrial and commercial. In Colorado, a good pipe fitter can make $75K a year before any overtime, by the time they're 22 or 23. That's with basically no student debt accrued. It's a job that's always in demand too. It can be a tough job, but you'll never hurt for work. No idea if this is true or not, but when I was in the army, we were told that parachute riggers, the people who pack parachutes, work by just having a certain quota of chutes they have to pack per day. Apparently it's a very boring task, and the longer they keep going, the more likely a mistake will be made. Because of this, the guys who've been doing it for years and are really good at it complete their quota for the day in about 2 or 3 hours, so they're home every day by 11. I know a guy who's an emergency medical technician for an overnight shift at an oil rig in Alaska, I believe. He sits on Path of Exile all night in his trailer with Wi-Fi and a laptop. He's been working for 2 years and has had 3 calls, one of which was only a bear walking around in the vicinity of the outer fence. Makes about $200,000 a year. Repairing equipment in a clean room. No education necessary. Very rare to see a tech with a degree. The clean room is kept at 65 degrees Fahrenheit, you're wearing a full suit over your street clothes, and everything you work on requires gloves, so your hands stay dirt and callus-free. Don't tell my boss, but the job is actually fun. I'm sitting right now with my coworkers and I read them this question. We all agree our job as independent insurance adjusters should be added to this. We're currently working auto flood claims for cars damaged from Hurricane Matthew. Our pay rate is $39 an hour and $58.50 overtime per hour. Anything over 40 hours is overtime, by the way. We're working 7 days a week, 11 hours a day, so it's very lucrative. There is travel involved and you never know how long any particular deployment will last, but I recently finished up a 2-year deployment working a desk job making a similar rate, although that was only 6 days a week. I crap you not, a professional determining whether a young chicken is a male or female can earn $60K a year. At least according to an article I was reading in Business Insider a while back, so take that for what it is. I mean, that's not retire early money, but I think it's crazy high for feeling chicken bits for a living. Actuaries. Not truly no one knows per se, but a lot of people aren't really aware of them. Let me save you some time. The examinations are brutal, you'll cry and hate yourself unless you're a masochist who loves numbers. As a student taking these exams currently, I can concur. There are so many and they will continually get more difficult. The narrator has just read up on what this is, and no thank you. Being slaughtered in school and then subject to lawsuits when you inevitably fail to predict market upheaval sounds like it's not worth it in my book. Working on a billionaire's yacht. They don't drive, cook, or clean or serve themselves. I have a friend whose father is British and his mother is Japanese. He grew up in China for most of his life, but spent a few years in America and some in Japan. He's naturally fluent in Japanese, Chinese, and English. He works for some Chinese company and is essentially the assistant for any big-name people who travel for business. His salary isn't anything incredible, like $75K, but he sometimes goes weeks without working, and when he travels with them, he's treated as an equal and gets to eat and drink at some of the finest restaurants in the world and stays in amazing hotels. Radiologist. Most people don't know what we really do or our contribution to their care, so much so that the American College of Radiology put out a campaign, Face of Radiology. A white guy can pretty much go to China and get paid to be a white guy, either teaching English, no teaching experience required, just need to speak English, or being paid to sit in on business meetings pretending to be an American investor. Giant crane operators make tons of money. Even small crane operators can do pretty well. Being a flight attendant for one of the good international airlines. My friend works for Emirates, and it's pretty much the ideal job for someone without a family. The salary is awesome, you only work about 14 days a month, you travel the world for free and enjoy mini vacations wherever you go, stay in 5-star hotels for free, get set up in a luxury apartment in Dubai for free, get discounts on international flights for you and your family, among other things. They had a yearly open call where everyone who fits the requirements can apply. They usually make announcements on their website and Facebook page. That's how she got in. They're pretty picky though. If you pass the initial screening, you have to get through a series of interviews that get more and more selective each round, so only a handful of people get the job in the end. Anesthesiologist's assistant. They work under the direction of licensed anesthesiologists, specialist physicians, and as part of the anesthesia care team. They start at $120K and move up to $160K per year. Custom cabinetry construction. On average, assuming the craftsman already has the tools on hand and knows how to make boxes already, the cost of custom making the average plywood kitchen cabinetry set, top and bottom cabinets including all wood, stains, handles and screws, not including countertop, runs about $700 to $900 in material costs, not including the labor. However, due to making the doors custom, they can charge upwards of $20 to $50K for a few days of work. There's a lot more to it, but the actual material and skill cost for making a bunch of boxes is way lower than what the average homeowner is being charged for custom kitchen cabinetry. Plus, there's a crazy huge demand for custom kitchens due to HGTV. Every middle-aged housewife wants a wine fridge. A guy used to pay me $30 an hour to cremate bodies. It's easy and I just listened to music the whole time. Kinda cliche, but I had death metal on full blast while burning bodies. Pretty cool, to be honest. After working in an office setting for my entire life, I've deduced that the money has to be amazing for printer, copier, and fax machine repair people. A never-ending list of work and overtime from what I can see. I'm convinced that there's an unwritten code that requires them to leave the machine in worse condition than what they found it in. Supply chain pays well and isn't overflowing with applicants. Most people at universities have no clue this major exists. I'm a college recruiter and sometimes struggle to find qualified supply chain candidates. The reason no one at universities knows it exists is because you don't need a degree to get into it. Can you handle a project and its components from cradle to grave? Can you properly maintain an inventory to support the project? Can you keep it within, or better yet, under budget? Congrats, you're winning at supply chain. My source? 5 years in supply chain management with a defense contractor. No degree or previous experience. Got no gag reflex? Enjoy other people's number twos? Have your scuba certification? Become a construction diver. Make $10,000 to dive into wetted structures at the wastewater treatment plant. You're usually done in about 4 hours. Well, 6 if you count the shower. It's a tough job to find, but being a technical writer for imported things. My job was to take the directions included with the Chinese-made DIY furniture, which were in horribly translated English, and rewrite them to make sense to the average English speaker. I did it informally and got a couple of grand per assignment, but the company I did it for went out of business, and I wouldn't even know where to look for that kind of job again. I found it through a relative the first time. When you subscribe, make sure to hit the bell to turn on notifications. Put the playlist on in the background to finish listening to all the stories, or if you want some vibey music to put on in the background, check out Easy Mode. If you like Am I the Genius, give Am I the Jerk a shot. Everything linked in the description.